Welcome back to the deep dive. Okay, so you sent us some really intense material this time. A lot about surveillance, digital control, potential hidden agendas, maybe?
Yeah, definitely some heavy stuff. Whitney Webb's work came up quite a bit, and it really pushes us to ask some big questions about where all this tech is heading.
Right, and the core question, I think, from looking through it all is, are these systems, tools for safety, for progress, or could they actually, maybe even without meaning to, end up threatening our privacy, our freedom?
Exactly. It's that kind of balancing act, isn't it? What are we building and what could it become?
And that analogy that kept popping up in the sources, wow, comparing surveillance tools to missile launchers, that really stuck with me. Built for defense, sure, but they could be turned around, right?
Yeah.
Used for something oppressive.
Absolutely. And the link they drew to China's social credit system, that makes it feel much less theoretical. It's like, okay, that's what it could look like.
Yeah, pretty showing.
So our mission today, I guess, is to unpack all of this. Look at the info, the arguments, the evidence you sent, without getting totally lost in the weeds, hopefully.
Right, makes sense of it. Okay, so let's start there. This idea that surveillance tech, it's sold as a shield, but maybe it's also a sword.
Yeah, potentially. And Palantir is a huge example that comes up. Webb's analysis really focuses on it as this powerful tool, maybe operating a bit under the radar for most people.
And its origin is interesting too, isn't it? Didn't it kind of grow out of that old Total Information Awareness program?
That's right. The post 9/11 thing that got shut down because everyone was worried about privacy.
Yeah, I remember that.
But the idea didn't completely die. Palantir, co-founded by Peter Thiel, kind of stepped into that space. Less public fuss, maybe, but still doing massive data analysis. The demand was still there.
And it's not small scale. We're talking NSA, ICE, even the NHS in the UK.
It's deeply integrated.
That New York Times report you sent from 2020, that really hit home. How ICE uses it to track immigrants. That's a concrete example right there.
Yeah, it takes it out of the realm of just what if and shows you the what is.
So you can see why groups like the ACLU are raising red flags, calling it a black box.
Right. You pour all this data in, analysis happens. But what exactly is going on inside? How transparent is it? How accountable? Those are the big worries.
Of course, Palantir pushes back, don't they? They say clients control the data and, hey, look, we help find billions in fraud, helped with vaccine rollouts.
Absolutely, and you have to include that perspective. It's not all one-sided.
Let's go back to that missile analogy.
Okay.
Even if it's used for good things now, fighting crime, public health, whatever the capability, still there, isn't it? The infrastructure for mass surveillance.
That's the core of the concern, yeah. Could that same system, under different circumstances, maybe different leaders, be repurposed, turned into a tool for control? That's the unsettling part.
And it's not just a hypothetical fear, because the sources point straight at China. Their social credit system. That's like the ultimate example of this, isn't it?
It really is. We're talking about, 1.4 billion people being scored on their behavior. It sounds like something out of science fiction, but it's happening right now.
And Human Rights Watch reported on it. 2022, I think. The real world impacts.
Yeah, exactly. Millions apparently banned from flying, maybe other restrictions too, just because their score dropped. Based on what the government calls bad behavior.
Wow.
That's the sharp end of pervasive surveillance linked directly to social control. It shows you what's possible when that power isn't checked, especially in an authoritarian context. It's a stark warning.
Now, it's easy to say, oh, that's China. Couldn't happen here. We have different laws of free press, supposedly.
Oh, the context is different.
But then you look at something like what happened in Canada during the protests in 2022. Freezing bank accounts.
That definitely raised eyebrows.
He just shows that even here, the mechanisms for pretty rapid financial control, they exist. They can be switched on quickly.
It does highlight that, yeah. Even if the scale and the legal basis are totally different from China, it makes you wonder about the underlying plumbing, so to speak. What allows for that kind of action?
So it forces the question, are we building these surveillance tools just for crime fighting and security? Or are we, maybe accidentally, maybe not, laying the tracks for much broader control down the line? That dual use potential is worrying.
It absolutely is. And that leads right into the next big area. Digital IDs and this idea of money you can't hide.
Right. The fear being that you combine these and suddenly every penny you spend is tracked, linked to your digital identity. Total financial oversight.
It sounds pretty dystopian when you put it like that, but you can see how different pieces might fit together, like WorldCoin.
Oh yeah, the iris scanning crypto thing.
Right, scan your eye, get some crypto. They had, 4.5 million signups by early 2024, especially in poorer areas.
Which raises its own ethical questions, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Webb and others were pretty critical about potential exploitation there.
For sure. Is it fair to ask people in tough situations to trade unique biometric data for a bit of crypto? Sam Altman, who's behind it, says it's about financial inclusion, giving people access.
It's a tricky debate.
Definitely. Inclusion versus privacy. And then you had the COVID vaccine passports for a while.
Right. They mostly faded away, like in the EU, as the sources said.
Yeah, but they showed it was technically possible, didn't they? Linking a digital ID to permission to do certain things in society. The plumbing, again, is there.
And this is all happening while, over 100 countries are looking into digital currencies, central bank digital currencies, CBDCs.
Yeah, and China's already doing it with the ECNY on a massive scale.
The IMF, the International Monetary Fund, they see potential upsides, right? Like efficiency, banking the unbanked.
They do. They mention those benefits in their 2023 analysis. But they also flagged the big privacy risks. If a central bank can see and potentially even control every single digital transaction, that's a huge shift in power.
So even things like stable coins, like Tether, they're not totally separate. I saw something about them working with the FBI.
Yeah, in 2023 for fraud investigations. So it wasn't like general spying, but it shows even supposedly decentralized things can be tracked or linked back when needed. True anonymity seems hard to come by.
Okay, but what about Argentina? The sources mentioned a crypto boom there. Is that part of some big plan or something else?
That seems like a really important counterpoint, actually. Chainalysis data from 2024 suggests it's mostly about inflation, like 140% inflation. People are just trying to protect their money.
So practical reasons, not a U.S. plot or something.
It's that way. We got to be careful not to see conspiracy everywhere.
Yeah.
But back to the missile analogy again.
Okay.
Surveillance tools for defense. Financial tech for efficiency. But what if you combine digital IDs with programmable, government-run digital money? Could that create a system like China's social credit, where your money, your ability to live life, is tied to your behavior? The technology to do that seems to be getting closer and closer.
It's interesting that the U.S. apparently banned retail CBDCs in 2025 over privacy worries. Maybe dodging a bullet, like you said.
Potentially, yeah. But the tech itself keeps moving forward globally, and that core question remains. How do you get the benefits without sacrificing financial privacy? Nobody seems to have a perfect answer yet.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Carbon credits. This is another area where things seem complicated. Pitched as a climate solution, but there are worries it's maybe not effective, or even a bit of a scam.
Yeah, that's the tension. Whitney Webb in the material you sent was particularly sharp on this, claiming something like 90% of them are basically worthless, don't actually reduce emissions.
And that they might even help with land grabs. Colombia was mentioned.
Yeah, And that 2023 Guardian report seemed to back up some of the skepticism. It found a lot of rainforest carbon credits didn't really lead to extra emissions cuts.
It's a big market though, right? Like $2 billion.
Around that, yeah. Though apparently quite unstable. And look, there are efforts to create better standards, better checks, but the fundamental doubts about whether it really works or who benefits most, they linger.
What about figures like Richard Sandor? He's like a pioneer in these markets, right?
He is, yeah. Deep background in finance, creating markets. Some sources might imply wrongdoing, but just being involved doesn't automatically mean fraud, obviously. It does show, though, how financial engineering is central to this whole space.
So the incentive might be more about trading the credits than actually cutting emissions at the source.
That's the risk, isn't it? If the verification isn't rock solid, it could just become another way for well-positioned players to make money. Yep. And you've got groups like Amnesty International raising concerns about people being displaced by these projects, too.
But then, institutions like the World Bank say, hold on, this money funds conservation. It helps green tech.
Right. Again, competing narratives. Potential benefits versus real risks and documented problems.
So the question for the listener is, are carbon credits as they are now a genuine climate fix? Or more of a financial tool that maybe doesn't do what it says on the tin and benefits a select few?
That sums it up pretty well. Needs a critical eye.
Okay, last big theme. These elite networks, hidden agendas. The idea that maybe this isn't all just happening organically, but that powerful people are steering things for profit or control.
Yeah, that narrative definitely exists. Webb and others mention the PayPal mafia, for instance.
Oh.
Thiel, Reid Hoffman, people who were there at the start of online finance and now have huge influence in tech and finance.
And they definitely do have influence, no question. But the sources also pointed out they're not exactly aligned politically, are they? Thiel's conservative, Hoffman's Democrat.
Right. And their group Endeavor, it mainly funds startups. It doesn't automatically scream secret plot for world domination. Influence isn't the same as a coordinated conspiracy.
And again, Argentina's crypto thing.
Yeah.
Probably more about inflation than some elite pushing it on them.
Exactly. Economic reality is often a much bigger driver than secret handshakes.
That said, that Wired piece you sent gave good context. The PayPal mafia's influence might be more about shaping the culture of tech competition, innovation, certain values, rather than a literal plot.
That seems plausible. But the fact remains, power is concentrated in tech and finance. A relatively small number of people and companies make decisions that affect everyone. That's just reality.
So the final question here, maybe for the whole deep dive, is, are we seeing deliberate manipulation by a few powerful players? Or is this more like the messy, sometimes worrying outcomes of how capitalism and tech innovation work, where profit and progress can have unintended, far-reaching side effects?
Yeah, I think that's the fundamental tension to grapple with. Is it directed or is it systemic?
Okay, so wrapping this up, we've covered a lot. Palantir surveillance, that really sticky missile analogy, and the very real example of China's social credit system as a warning.
Then digital IDs, programmable money, the efficiency versus freedom trade-off.
The whole carbon credit debate, climate solution or financial gain.
And the questions around elite influence, concentrated power versus actual conspiracy.
And while the sources definitely raise serious concerns, surveillance, control, potential scams, it doesn't all neatly tie up into one single grand plot, does it?
Doesn't seem like it, based on what we looked at. It feels more like complex systems interacting with definite risks and potential downsides, some intended, some maybe not.
But that missile analogy, technologies built for one thing, potentially being used for another, more oppressive thing.
Yeah.
That feels like the crucial takeaway. And China's system shows it's not just theory.
It's a powerful reminder to stay vigilant, absolutely.
So for everyone listening, as this tech gets woven deeper into our lives, how do we find that balance? Security versus freedom? Are the safeguards we have enough? What's our role in shaping this? Lots to think about.
Definitely.
Thanks so much for diving in with us today. Please stay curious, keep asking questions. It's important.
Yeah, and all the sources we talked about are in the show notes if you want to dig deeper yourselves. Check them out, do your own research, form your own views.
And maybe one last thought to leave you with for the week. In this world of growing digital footprints and surveillance, what does privacy even mean anymore? And what lines are we, individually and collectively, willing to draw to protect it?